We already briefly discussed that most elements fall into either being inline or block level elements. We see on the screen here some inline image elements. This has the effect of each element being on the same line, if it will fit. There is one thing though to be aware of when using inline elements. We can add margin and padding to the left and right, like we see here, but we cannot add it to the top and bottom. This is because content added with inline elements are intended to flow across the page and then onto the next line. Adding any extra height would disrupt this flow. Also, we are unable to set the width and height too. Block level elements, on the other hand, begin on a new line and take up the full available width, such as a div or text when using the P element. They also allow us to set any margin and padding too without any restrictions, unlike we've just seen with inline elements. There is a way though to have this inline behavior while also being able to set the margin and padding. And this is to set the element to be inline block. Inline block is commonly used in navigations. By default, list items are block level elements. So one will make a list that will stack on top of each other. We commonly see nav links as inline or inline block like we see here. Inline block allows the items to flow across the page, but still gives us the flexibility to control the padding and margin values. We can change any element's default display type by using the CSS display property to override it. So let's go and give this a go now. Over in the CSS, starting with the li element. So just below this unordered list, we can target the li. And then set the display type to be inline. Give that a save. Then back over to our project, refresh, and now our links appear in line across the page. This works as intended. The header list items are in line, but targeting all of the li elements like this also includes these sidebar list items too. If we only want to target these header list items, we can be more specific. So if we go over to the CSS, rather than just targeting the li, we can add header, li, give that a save, and over to the browser and refresh. And now we can see that this only selects any list items which are inside the header. The sidebar ones are untouched. We can go even further with this header section 2 by making the site title and also these nav links inline too. In fact, we can make these inline block so we can still control the height too. Setting these as inline block will make sure that this title appears on the left hand side, and then over on the right hand side we'll get the navigation links which are surrounded in the nav element. So back over to the CSS, we can target the site title with header h1. Then separate by a comma, we can also target the nav element too. Set the display, this time to be inline block, and then refresh. Now we have the navigation and the site title lining up across the header. Inline block is also a good way of lining up the products too. So let's give this a go inside the product div here. Let's change the display type again to be inline block. Over to the browser and inside the index page, let's scroll down. And now we have our products lining up across the page too. This inline block property can even be used to have the sidebar, which is currently here, and also these products side by side. So remember, the sidebar was in the aside element, and all these products were contained in the main section. So let's first go over to the CSS, and we can set the width of the main and the aside section. So I'm going to add this just underneath the header h1 and nav section. Let's first begin with the main section and set the width to be 680 pixels. Then we can make sure the sidebar also fits across the row by setting the aside width to be 270 pixels. So I've selected these two values here. When combined, these are both less than the 1000 pixels body width, which we had earlier. Therefore, setting the aside and main to these sizes will make sure that they both fit across the page, and also allow for some margin and padding too. So let's see how this is looking. Reload, and we can now see the sidebar is a little bit wider if we take a look at the width of this line here, and also the product section has been restricted to this part here. So now let's go over and set the display type to be inline block. So first for the main, the display type of inline block, and then also for the sidebar. And then hopefully if we save this and now go over, we can now see these side by side, since the aside and the main section are both inline block. So things are starting to look better now, but the sidebar items down here are at the very bottom. To fix this when working with inline elements, or even inline block, which acts a lot like inline, we have access to a CSS property called vertical align. If we go over to the sidebar, just under the display, we can also set the vertical align and place the text at the top. And hopefully it should now push our text to the top of the sidebar, which it does. This vertical align property can be used to align inline items or items inside of table cells. We mentioned in the slides earlier that when using inline elements, we can add margin and padding to the left and right, but we can't add it to the top and bottom. This can be seen with our product links of more info and add to cart. Let's go ahead and add some padding to see what happens. So first we need to give them a class over in the index page, and I'm going to give these a class of button. So first let's go to the very top product and look for these two links. Then we can go ahead and add a class name of button. So class equals button. And then we need to add these to all of our products. So I'm going to copy this and add this to the second link too. And then go down to our second product, and we can add it to all these to keep the styling consistent. That's our third product, the fourth product, and the last one too. Then we can use this button class over in the style sheet. So down at the very bottom, remember classes use the dot and then the name of button. Some padding of 10 pixels will be fine. Save that. And now over to the index page and refresh. We can see the padding has added some space in between the buttons, but there is no extra height. Remember, we only added one value of 10 pixels. So usually this would apply to all four sides, but we only see this on the left and right. This is because, as we already know, we can't affect the height with margin and padding on inline elements, but we can on block and inline block. Therefore, if we go over to the CSS and change the display type of the button to be inline block, we can see what effect this has in the browser. As soon as we refresh, we now see some extra height added to each one of these buttons. So here we've looked at the display property, and as you can see, it's really important when laying out our website. It may seem a little tricky to understand at first, but you can see with this example how effective it is, even by just adding a few lines of code into our CSS.